know the tax code and can make the difficult task of making your tax filing easier. Relax. Contact us at 937-325-6571. Information at lairdstax.com.
The Pickleball Slam is back. Andre Agassi and Steffi Graf, John McEnroe and Maria Sharapova, 4 world number ones. Last year's Slam champion.
I'm going to make John relive his defeat to me again.
And a legend who wants only one thing.
Revenge. We are going to destroy you.
It's on.
Pickleball Slam 2 live from Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, Hollywood, Florida. Presented by State Farm and Bright House Financial. Live on ESPN Sunday at 8:30.
Coming to you live from the Superbook Sports Studios in Kettering. You're listening to Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM.
All right, everybody, welcome in. It's the Kenner and Kev Show live here on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. I'm Justin Kenner. He's Kev Nash. Mr. Kev Nash, welcome.
What up, though?
Busy show today.
Indeed.
Got Jason Fitz coming up, Yahoo Sports. He'll join us here in about 15 minutes. We'll talk, of course, the NFL season basically winding down. We're getting, I mean, it's, no obviously game this week or the Pro Bowl. So no game this weekend. Super Bowl, obviously, around the corner. Fitz will be hanging out with us the next couple weeks. His visits usually end after the Super Bowl, of course, so we always appreciate the time he gives us throughout the year. So we'll chat with him. We got the association catch-up around the corner. Chris Holtman, we'll talk a little Buckeye basketball coming up here.
Do we have to?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Dayton Flyers, they got the win last night at home. They coming off that Richmond loss. Rich what?
Richmond.
They got that Richmond
loss. That's the only movie you know.
I love that movie. But nonetheless, they had that loss over the weekend that ended their big win streak, and Anthony Grant was curious to see how their team was going to respond against adversity because, when you win a lot, and so you talked about the other day, hey, there's a lot of things that you do wrong even during win streaks that, coaches don't really focus on because you don't want to mess with the morale of the team a little bit. You want to ride that momentum train. A loss hits. Now you can use that moment, an opportune time to kind of button up some of those things. But he wanted to see how his team was going to respond after a tough loss, like that, on the road the way they did. Well, they took care of George Washington last night. They took care of business.
Took care of him real good.
Yep. Wright State in action tomorrow night, 9:00. They got Youngstown State in town, a return game. They lost by 10 the last time at Youngstown State. Youngstown State 11-1 at home. 5-5 on the road, obviously.
Looking for revenge.
It's a little tougher to win on the road than it is at home, and Wright State hoping to use that home court advantage tomorrow night. That late tip-off, though.
9:00. You'll be there.
I will be there. 8:45 pregame coverage begins right here on Dayton's radio, home of Wright State basketball. 1410 Wing AM and 101.5 Hank FM. Let's see. We have a lot. I mean, there's plenty. I know I don't even have my rundown. I left it in my office, but we'll just wing it. It's WING.
Hey.
We will just wing it. How about this? We talk all the time about the player rivalries in sports, but I did not on my obscure sports bingo card. I did not have a kicker versus arguably the best quarterback in the history of the NFL as the rivalry. Justin Tucker against Patrick Mahomes and technically Travis Kelce. A lot's been made about that little scuffle, if you will, where everyone was saying how the Chiefs were being a bunch of bullies, and then Justin Tucker does his good guy routine in the post game. And this is the same routine that all kickers do all season. And then Travis Kelce has a couple profanities to use that I can't air on these airwaves. But basically saying that's all BS. Patrick Mahomes even saying that, there's only a handful of times that they've run into kickers warming up on their side of the field when it's their time to be out on the field, and they always happen to be in Baltimore. So who knows? But that to me is the big rivalry right there.
Yeah, I mean, players have routines. So just because Patrick Mahomes has his routine doesn't mean Justin Tucker doesn't have his routine. And those two routines collided in the biggest game of the season for the Baltimore Ravens. Not only they got into it, there was a pushing match before the game even started. There were several scuffles on the field. Most of those went the way of the Ravens in 15-yard penalties. Like I said on Monday's show, got up in that head, man, got inside their head, and that was all she wrote.
Right now, of course, we talked about the experience of these teams. Experience helped the Chiefs, obviously, from their experience play. I mean, they what 5 straight AFC Championship games and a 5th Super Bowl in 4 years, 4th Super Bowl in 5 years. They have the experience. The Niners, they have experience as well, but obviously, this is a first-time Super Bowl appearance for their quarterback in Brock Purdy. Experience, how much of a factor do you think that is going to play a role in this? The Chiefs have that advantage right there. The Niners were just in the Super Bowl a few years ago. There are still some players on that roster, but I think it always comes down to the experience of your quarterback, the most important piece to the puzzle when it's all said and done.
It's definitely going to play a factor in it. I mean, it would be silly to think that, like, hey, man, a guy making his first start in the Super Bowl going up against a team and a quarterback and a coach and playmakers on that other side of the ball that has played. I mean, shoot, that defense, we talk about how good it is and how young it is. Guess what? They were just in the same position last year.
Yep.
So they have all the experience. Now, we could talk about all the great players that the San Francisco 49ers have, but, they have some new additions since the last time they played in that Super Bowl. It's going to be on Shanahan to make sure those guys are ready for the moment. And I mean, shoot, how many different times since the Super Bowl have been in cities like an Atlanta or Miami where a guy goes rogue from the team? I mean, what was the guy, Barrett Roberts from the Raiders? I remember one of the Falcons guys, not this most recent Super Bowl that they played in, but the Dirty Bird era of the Falcons. Their safety got caught soliciting a prostitute on South Beach like the night before the Super Bowl. I mean, this Super Bowl is being played in Las Vegas. So, I know we talked about it a little bit. Maybe we talked about it on the air, maybe not, but like they have the team staying like 45 minutes away from, the strip, kind of keep them away from the action, so to speak. I'm not sure, but like it's a lot that goes into it. There's a 2-week break in between now and then to a lot of players to get tickets and all that type of stuff before they lock in for the game. There's a lot of distractions that go into this. A team that's already had to deal with those distractions multiple times definitely has the leg up.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. You talked about this. It's not just the experience during the game; it's the decisions you make outside the game, especially that weekend. Again, just the hypocrisy of the league. Just the NFL is one of the most. I mean, all sports are hypocrites when it's all said and done. But basically, they've upped their gambling restrictions too. Like no gambling allowed, none whatsoever. Not even on other sports. Nothing. Just no. I mean, this entire weekend. Total restriction as far as that's concerned with anything regarding that. So that's interesting as far as that's concerned when you look at how all that's going to pan out when that's all said and done. One more thing I wanted to touch on with this too. You talk about the penalties and stuff in that Ravens in the Chiefs game. Taunting was one thing that a lot of people were talking about too. Joe Burrow put out a tweet that said, "Let the guys taunt."
No.
Let the guys taunt. And by the way, I have no problem. Like I get why Joe Burrow plays on one of the cockiest teams in football. He plays on a team. He plays with guys that are the cockiest guys in football who taunt more than anyone else. They're all about coming up with the different dances and everything, just like all teams. Don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes when you see Joe Burrow tweet something out like that, I think that tweet was basically he's picturing Jamar Chase in that situation. Like we know, you know what I mean? Like dang right, dang well that's when he sees that and he sees that penalty be thrown. He's picturing himself back in the AFC Championship game. He's picturing himself back in a game against the Chiefs, a close game, everything on the line. He's picturing Jamar Chase getting up and doing a little shuffle or whatever and getting the taunting penalty thrown on him. That's who I think he's defending. I think he's just putting it out there. I think the players are trying to get the taunting a little bit more acceptable amongst the officials, but it's not just the taunting that's the problem. It's what it potentially brings afterwards. I figure that's where you're going to go with this.
Absolutely. Look, man, I'm not a rules of the rules type of guy. That's not how I live my life. But like, there's a difference between celebrating and taunting. What Zay Flowers did was taunting. You caught the pass, you flexed. That's celebrating. You spun the ball in the DB's face. That is taunting. You then got into the other player's face, which could be borderline taunting or not. But it's the ball spin. That is what draws the flag. I'm not sure what Joe Burrow is talking about or any other player that says, "Oh, no, that's not taunting." It's been taunting since the game was been invented, that you can't spin the ball in somebody's face after making a play. It's taunting, 15 yards. Deal with it.
And again, if Joe Burrow says, "Let the players celebrate," I'm team Joe Burrow. Let the players taunt. That's like saying, "Let the players jump off sides." Oh, come on. Let him hit the quarterback after he got rid of the football. Oh, come on.
I am with that.
Let the coaches run out onto the field and put their foot out and trip a player running up the side. Come on, just let them break the rules. Like, that's why Joe Burrow's tweet was kind of ridiculous. Let them taunt. You let them celebrate. I'm with you. Let them taunt. No, because again, that's what leads to, well, basically it's what it led to, the taunting before the game and all this stuff. And let's be clear, there's taunting that goes on before every game. Jamar Chase taunts. I mean, the whole pretending to be the victim in that Chiefs game late in the season. Joe Burrow was obviously out, but it was the second to last week or whatever when they played the Chiefs. He had ran his mouth about the Chiefs secondary the entire time. When he got out there, they ran their mouth. It led to a big old thing before. Sometimes it's not just taunting on the field. It's the taunting in general. It's the pre-game taunting coming in. Look what that leads to. So what do you think? You're at the heat of the moment. It's a physical game. And then you have the guy walk over you, stand over. Oh, man, that would tick me off too. It's always what it's going to lead to. It's just preventative measures by the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, you even think back to that game between the Bengals and the Chiefs. Both guys got 15-yard penalties, and they were offset. So it's kind of no harm, no foul. But, like, taunting and celebrating are two totally different things. And to the NFL's credit, they do allow players to celebrate. I mean, they allow choreographed routines after interceptions or after touchdowns and stuff like that. You can use the ball. I mean, think about it, especially Cincinnati Bengals fans remember this. Like when Chad Johnson would score touchdowns, he would constantly get penalties for his celebrations. So the league has opened up to celebrations. You can't spin the ball in somebody's face. You just can't. This is what it is, man. Like, you just can't. I think that's pretty clear that you can't do that.
Common sense, Joe Burrow. Come on, that's your guys' quarterback, really? No.
And Zay Flowers.
Let's let the players celebrate. Absolutely. Let the players taunt. Not so much. A lot of people there's people burying the Pro Bowl. I mean, we barely. I made one little slide about the Pro Bowl to open up the show, and people are just Deborah Gall right off the bat. Let me make sure people can read these. She says Pro Bowl boring. Would rather watch a blank TV screen. Well, to be honest, based on ratings from the Pro Bowl, I think a lot of people watch a blank TV screen over that. No doubt about it. So, Troy says Pro Bowl is unwatchable. As far as that's concerned. Deborah even goes on to say, I would rather watch the two teams that lost the divisional games play each other for third place bragging rights.
I like that.
As far as that's concerned, but nonetheless. But is what it is. But the Pro Bowl, I mean, look, for me, what's the backup quarterback for the Ravens?
Huntley.
The second he got named a Pro Bowler, that's when I lost our respect. No offense to him. Holy moly. Like that, just like they don't care. I mean, all the reserves and all this stuff, like I don't like it. The Pro Bowl is a waste of everyone's time. Maybe to the point. But I've even talked to KB, who is a former Pro Bowl running back when the Pro Bowl actually mattered and was a real thing. He even mocks the Pro Bowl today. Old players of the past say the Pro Bowl is meaningless today. The Pro Bowl players today tell you it's meaningless. That's why some of them, if they even have just a slightly hurt pinky, I'm going to sit this one out. Yeah, Pro Bowl. I'm with the listeners on this.
Oh yeah, I'm not. I haven't watched the Pro Bowl in decades. I haven't watched the Pro Bowl maybe since Peyton Manning played in it back when he was talking about his liquored up kicker. Remember that interview he had right before the Pro Bowl? I think that's like the last time I watched it. And that's like kind of still when they were playing. That's when Sean Taylor was out here smoking people like it was a real game. So that's probably like the last time I've watched the Pro Bowl. It's not for me. I'll be watching Netflix.
Yep. Adam Selzner says the Pro Bowl lost all value when the players lost all value from the players when the NFL moved it from Hawaii.
Shoot, think about this. It used to be in Hawaii. Then they did that like 1 year or two in Orlando or whatever. But also, like, I remember KB talking about this before. Like, it was like kind of like, hey, you honor the guys that just won the Super Bowl, because the Pro Bowl used to be the week after the Super Bowl. Now it's the week before the Super Bowl. So the season basically ends with the Super Bowl. Makes a ton of sense. But Pro Bowl, I'm not here for none of it. I'm not here for the game. I'm not here for the antics that go along with it, like what they do, like dodgeball and kickball and all that type of stuff. This ain't rock and jock. This is the NFL, man. I'm good. And guess what? I don't have to watch.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, joins us next.
It's the Justin Kinner Show with Kev Nash.
Justin, you're awesome, baby.
Right here on 1410 ESPN Radio. ESPN 1410 Wing AM weather.
Today it's going to be generally cloudy. Some areas of patchy fog, a high around 40. Tonight, cloudy skies in the evening will become partly cloudy after midnight, low of 33 degrees. Tomorrow, for your Thursday, partly cloudy skies in the morning, giving way to cloudy skies during the afternoon, high near 50. I'm Adam Zellick for 1410 ESPN Radio.
Hey, you're up next.
Ugh, my throat hurts so bad. There's no way I can sing tonight.
Here, try these.
Vicks VapoCool drops.
Yeah, Vicks VapoCool drops has maximum strength menthol with a rush of Vicks vapors.
Ooh, I can already feel it.
I told you. So, you ready?
I'm ready.
Please welcome to the stage.
Vaporize sore throat pain fast with Vicks VapoCool drops.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go. Shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit notimetowait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
And now, Public Education Matters with Ohio Education Association President Scott Tomorrow.
Social media can be a powerful tool in our students' lives. And when families understand, monitor, and guide their teens, our young people can use it to build positive connections while being shielded from some of the potential negative impacts. Go to the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center's website for helpful resources for caregivers and educators alike.
Public Education Matters, brought to you by the Ohio Education Association.
Veterans, were you exposed to harmful burn pit smoke while serving overseas? The Department of Veterans Affairs has recognized and is providing benefits to veterans who suffer with asthma, rhinitis, and sinusitis as a result of burn pit exposure. If you served in the Southwest Asia Theater of Operations or Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Syria, or Djibouti, and suffer from any respiratory illnesses that you believe is a result of exposure to burn pits, contact the Montgomery County Veterans Service Commission at 937-225-4801.
Kenner and Kev Show live here on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. Let's see. You talked about the Pro Bowl to open up, kind of. Mark Smith says, I'd rather watch Kenner do a 3-step drop back pass than watching the Pro Bowl.
How's the arm?
Well, sore.
How far you think you can throw a football?
I don't know. What's 40, 50 yards? I can just bomb it. like right now, like without stretching first. I mean, I gotta be careful. I can't just be out there getting hurt.
We got to set you up.
I'm not like an NBA player where I can just take all these days off, you know? So I think we've all established the Pro Bowl's unwatchable. Okay. David Shaw says, is Kenner even going to do the field goal? People still bringing up that field goal.
We are working on that. We are efforting that for the fall.
You see, it's kind of cold outside, you know.
Cold outside.
It's cold outside, so there's that.
You know what? We should do the punt, pass, kick. Kenner's punt, pass, kick.
Can I punt, pass, kick?
We're going to find out.
You're going to learn today. David Shaw. Oh, it's our next guest. There's no bigger fan of our next guest than obviously us, but David Shaw, he just loves Jason Fitz. Just loves him. Just because, you know, Jason keeps it real about Michigan, you know, and Shaw hates anyone that uses common sense when talking about his team. He says, good afternoon, fellas. Did I just hear that Fitz is coming on? Oh, yay. It is yay. It's a big time yay. We are excited to bring on Jason Fitz. Jason Fitz making friends everywhere you go. I don't think it's a surprise that Shaw is just not a Jason Fitz fan.
Well, I mean, look, just remind everybody, I was one that said I thought Harbaugh was staying in Michigan. So, you know, here I was trying to give his team a little bit of love, and now all of a sudden It's not my fault that Michigan's getting outspent by Ohio State right now. Like, hey, you got a national championship, and that's great. But I'm telling you, like, let's see how it looks moving forward. There we go. Like the same program. By the way, I'm just going to say this just to piss him off, but I'm just going to be honest here for a second. The same program that just lost Harbaugh as a coach wouldn't have lost him if they'd have just gotten the deal done earlier. Like, if they had loved Harbaugh as much as Michigan fans love Harbaugh right now, they would have already done the longer deal. Never would have been an issue. He would have been where he was. But they chose not to. So when the NCAA comes down to the thunder of the gods, and you're sitting there watching Ohio State buy their way to the Big Ten championship, let me know how it's working for you there, buddy.
So, well, real quick, because I got to yesterday, we were talking about what Michigan's going to look like moving forward. Sherrone Moore, congrats to Sherrone Moore. He gets the dumpster fire that is left of the pro. So right off the bat, not talking about Sherrone Moore, can he make it long term, but what next season looks like. I mean, they play USC, they play Texas. Obviously, they have Ohio State, they play Oregon, they play everybody. I mean, how brutal can next season be for Michigan when they lose? I mean, pretty much half their roster. Obviously, new coaching staff coming in. The portal's going to hurt them even more moving forward. I mean, realistically, how bad of as great as last year was for them from a win standpoint, how bad can it be for Michigan in 24?
Yeah, I think they kind of scream 3-4 losses somewhere in that process.
Damn it.
But here's the part of it that is really like just bad for Michigan, right? Because what everybody wants to do is look at building for the future. So they'll all look at it and say, hey, well, we're recruiting. We've got this guy coming off the bench. Insert guy here. That doesn't matter anymore in college football because as much as I've joked about Ohio State a couple of times, what teams are doing now is looking at it and saying, okay, we're going to allocate between $10 and $20 million. And we're going to take that $10 and $20 million and we're going to go to the transfer portal and we are going to try and free agency our way to a championship every year. Does it work? I don't think so. Will it work? Long term, I don't think so. Is it going to work right now? I mean, that's the thing. You don't have the time as a program to turn around and say, you know what? It's just going to take a couple of years. We got to replace McCarthy and Corum. We'll be fine. It's just going to take a second. You don't have that grace anymore because the expectation in the transfer portal world is that you are going to be putting up playoff caliber football every single year. I think that's the expectation that's going to suffocate Michigan a little bit. And it's the very expectation that's going to create a wild amount of pressure on Ryan Day. I don't think there's a coach in all of football at any level that will be under more pressure next year than Ryan Day at Ohio State. Because if he doesn't win, Mike Vrabel has made it clear he wants that job, didn't get hired in the NFL. Mike Vrabel is going to be the coach of Ohio State before we blink if Ryan Day doesn't go out there and deliver at least a deep playoff run in this season with the amount they've spent.
Justin and I were talking about Coach Moore taking that job. Do you think that was a smart move for him to take that job, considering the NCAA is still out there?
I think the NCAA backs off a little bit now, but look, I had one insider a few months ago that I think is pretty plugged in tell me that the NCAA was looking at as much as a 1-year suspension. So for Harbaugh, so when you start talking about that, and look, right or wrong, I'm just telling you what people are reporting, right? So at some point, I look at that and say, man, that just tells you that the NCAA is going to have all eyeballs on it. It's unenviable, but here's the thing. Like, at least you get the love of, well, it's the NCAA's fault, and we're going to be patient, and everybody remembers Moore crying after the game and all of these great heartfelt Michigan moments. So I think he's in a better situation than, let's say, DeBoer is in Alabama, which I think is going to be an absolute dumpster fire, and he's just going to be sitting on that guaranteed money and not having a job in 3 years. So I think, they're not all of these situations are equal. Michigan's okay, but it's not great for him.
Man, so the DeBoer hire, like, it's not that it was a bad hire. Is it just this? I mean, or was it a bad hire? Like, what is your? I mean, it sounds like are you down on DeBoer? Or are you just down on the situation? Like, Alabama already got rocked hard in the portal. Ohio State and Georgia and some others benefited from that, of course. But yes, a very odd situation. The timing of Nick Saban's retirement, there's never the right time to retire. But, you look at other legendary coaches from other sports. You had Coach K, who announced it a year ahead of time so that there was a smooth transition process. There was a lot of clarity out on the recruiting trail, transparency and everything else. There was no shock to the Duke Blue Devil system when it was announced that Coach K was leaving. This just seemed this just sent shockwaves across the college football landscape. I mean, is it a DeBoer issue in your opinion, or is it anybody who was going to take this job over once Nick Saban left an issue?
I think DeBoer is a really good coach, but I think that this is a round peg in a square hole. And so part of what makes this difficult, number one, I'll go back to the time I spent around Washington players and DeBoer at the national championship team. I got to spend some pretty extended time with him and around that entire team. And he's a very quiet individual. He's a very measured individual. That's such a cultural change to everybody in Alabama, right? Like, I do think some of that plays into a little bit of why it's angsty for me. Also, let's look at just his trajectory. We have no idea at this point if DeBoer is capable of winning and sustaining at one program. He hasn't had to go somewhere and really recruit while using the transfer portal to show you sustained success. We have no idea, right? So I think that has to play into part of this conversation. Look at how many guys from Washington didn't come from him. So that's part of it. I thought he got wildly outcoached, by the way, in the national championship game. Michigan just absolutely had a better game plan from the outset. So that makes me nervous taking on that level of competition. And then there's just part of it. And, I'll never forget, I had somebody prominent in Alabama around football in the state of Alabama tell me years ago that the Alabama coaching staff would go into a high school and say, hey, your kid over there, he's now your left tackle because we want to see him at left tackle and we think he can play at Alabama someday. And they were doing that to freshmen walking in saying, nope, he's your left tackle. And every coach in the state says, well, if that's what Coach Saban wants, I'm not going to question him. Do any of us believe that DeBoer has that equity when he walks in with the players, with the coach, with everybody? Because, the weird part of it is that Saban being Saban had to matter. If another coach not named Saban walks in that room, it doesn't have the same power. If another coach not named Saban struggles against Georgia the way he did over the last 3 years, he's losing his job, right? So, I just think the modern climate combined with the square peg and a round hole, all of these things, it's just, for me, I'm out. I think this is going to be a nice 3-year experiment, and then Alabama will get back to figuring out what their real future looks like. Somebody had to be sort of the scapegoat, and that's what DeBoer is. Very well paid, though.
Here in Buckeye Country, we all feel pretty good about the trajectory of where Ohio State's going now. Got a little bleak, got a little dim. Before we get to the NFL real quick, last college football question here. It's easy for us in Buckeye Country to live in our silo and think, man, we're national, Ohio State, they're national champion favorites heading into next season with all the moves that they made. The collectives finally came together and finally decided, all right, there's no amount of money that we are going to shy away from to get these deals done. You call it free agency, you call it buying a championship. That's what college football is going to be moving forward. So you could either be like Dabo Swinney and sit back and watch everyone pass you by, or do what Ohio State finally did. And they were kind of reluctant too. They weren't as bad as Dabo was, but they were pretty reluctant to go all in on the transfer portal and go all in with the NIL stuff. But it's like a switch finally flipped with them, and you saw how aggressive they became right off the bat. What is the perception of Ohio State countrywide right now? You working for a national media outlet, of course. What is the perception of Ohio State in the college football landscape right now? Are they the favorites heading into 24? I know there's a lot. There's another portal movement still to go. There's a lot that could still happen. But what's the perception of Ohio State nationwide right now, not just in our Buckeye silo here in Ohio?
Yeah, they are the favorite. They should be the favorite. And part of it comes down to, as weird as it sounds, all of the things you just added up, but I'll add one more part of the equation, and that's playoff expansion. We're not in the world now where one loss is going to keep you out of this thing. It would take an absolute disaster for Ohio State to somehow miss the college football playoff. We all know that, right? So knowing that that's what they're playing for, it even begs you a little bit more time in the opportunity to gel together and figure out exactly how all these transfers are going to come in. Dream teams make me nervous at every sport. I don't care what we're talking about. Dream teams make me nervous. And this is about as close as you can get to a dream team process as we've ever seen. There is some real questions. There are questions about the future of college football. Can this work sustainably? And how often do we talk about in college basketball? Live and die by one and done. You live and die by one and done. This is the transfer portal equivalent of that. You're bringing in a lot of higher guns mercenaries to get this thing done. But they just simply have too much talent. And now in a college football playoff expansion world, even if they lose a game or two, they're still likely going to be a top 12 team that makes college football playoff. So all you got to do is be hot at that time and be better than everybody else then. And when you look at them on paper, none of us are playing the college football video game yet. But if you were, it is pretty clear who you'd be picking this summer if you wanted the easiest path to win. That's Ohio State. Got the most talent talked about them. I do believe in the coaching staff, by the way, and their ability to get it done. But I think the pressure cooker on there gives them a little extra motivation, a little extra spit. Yeah, I don't. Right now, if I was betting the future, I would handsomely bet on Ohio State to win the national championship.
Go Bucks.
Shaw's since Shaw can't root for his team because they won't be any good next year. Now he's mad at you because apparently Fitz doesn't think Georgia exists anymore.
Oh, Georgia does exist. I should give Georgia a little bit more love in this process. I should. That's probably fair. Georgia, wildly talented and recruits at the highest level in the world. Yeah, I'll give you. Georgia's going to be in the college football playoff too. I'm still a little shooketh by watching a defense that was as athletic as Georgia's was get carved up by an Alabama quarterback that I thought they'd be able to slow down. I truly thought Georgia would be the difference maker defensively against Bama, and they weren't. So I think that there's a little recency bias. I'm the first. See, Shaw, this can actually work this way. Like you can give feedback, and I can say, yeah, you're probably right. I'm probably underselling Georgia a little bit in that equation. But I also would not undersell Ohio State in this process.
Don't be nice to him. Don't be nice to him.
On to the NFL. Lamar's the worst quarterback ever to play football. Dan Campbell is a dummy.
So I did an interview this morning that'll go up later with Greg Olson, the Fox, the broadcaster. And we talked about analytics because that's what everybody talks about. And the funny thing is I joked with him. I said, here's what we know. No matter what somebody says about analytics, somebody else will tell you you're a moron. So, here's the nuanced take to me in this. The analytics are part of why the Lions lost. And on top of the analytics, dropping the ball on fourth down is part of why the Lions lost. And losing track of the running game in the second half is part of why the Lions lost. They're all part of the Rubik's Cube. I don't think you blame any one of them. But I also think that at some point, the numbers are an important voice. But just like head coaches in their ear will get somebody to come in and say, hey, coach, I think we should run the ball there. And the coach says, you know what, I just feel a little play action here. I need a coach to be able to look at the numbers and the analytics and say, hey, but the feel of the game tells me something. And the most important number to me in the second half was the number 5, because when the Lions, on the second time that they chose not to take the points, they had a total of 5 first downs in the second half. When your offense is not generating any offense, take what's there in front of you. And the number of times I've been at the blackjack table and said, hey, I never hit on 16. And then you're like, well, I've lost my butt today. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to walk away. There are times that you have to just look at it and say, the game's telling me something different than the numbers. And you got to listen to that. I think what we learned from Dan Campbell isn't that he's right or wrong about analytics. It's that you still have to maintain some sort of feel for the entire thing in the process. So that blew my mind. And while we're talking about coaching, yes, Lamar Jackson was not good enough in that game. But also, the Ravens' offensive game plan was garbage. Absolute. Mm-hmm. You have 3 rushes by your top running back against the Chiefs, who, by the way, a month ago got beat in a game where Aiden O'Connell didn't even complete a pass in the second half. The method to beating the Chiefs is to run the damn ball. And they didn't even try in the first half and most of the second half. They didn't try to get their running backs involved. They didn't try to commit to the run. I thought offensively and defensively, the Ravens came in with just hot garbage game plans. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall in Mike McDaniel's interview with the Seahawks. I know he's the head coach, but my first question would have been, the hell are you thinking sending 4, dropping everybody else back, and still playing them soft in the first half against Mahomes? Do you think somebody was going to beat you deep? Tell me what you saw that made that make sense. Yeah, I was frustrated by the Ravens' entire coaching staff in that process.
So Justin and I were having this conversation on Monday, kind of recapping the game. And, we don't believe in the conspiracy theories. We don't believe in the script and everything like that. But games like that make you say, what the heck? So how does something like that happen with guys that know more about football than all 3 of us combined? They're the best team in football all season long. But in that game where it's obvious to everybody that, hey, you guys are the number 1 running team in the NFL. You got a dude that can run at quarterback as well. You're not doing any zone read. You're not doing any RPO. You're just dropping back like it's Texas Tech. We're just going to air this thing out 50 times and we're not even going to think about the run. How does something like that happen?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I always take away from the guys I worked with when I was at ESPN, and you talk to guys that played in the league, the number of different guys that told me, man, we always talk about players' egos, and we rarely talk about coaches' egos. And I don't mean ego in a bad way. I'm not saying ego has to be a nasty word. I think if you're Todd Monken, you came in with this game plan that you saw something that made you think you were the smartest person in the room. And that's unfortunate because, sometimes, and look, I'm not equating to football to Madden, please just understand it, but I will use this analogy. Anybody that's ever played Madden competitively, where you got a bunch on the line, you got some cash on the line, all of a sudden you'll wake up in some games and you're like, what am I doing? I know how to win at this game, and I'm calling the stupidest plays in the world. Sometimes you just get in your own way in these things. And I think Todd Monken came in with a game plan that was cute instead of functional. And this is one of those, like, did you spend too much time anticipating what you thought Spags was going to do, so you countered when you didn't need to counter? Because Lamar had time when he dropped back several times. He wasn't running the ball in the first half.
Right.
They weren't running the ball in the first half. Like, it felt like they came out and they're like, hey, pay no attention. We've got this wild game plan. And Spags just switched over and was like, yeah, we knew you were going to do this. And one person I trust really with the league that has watched a lot of defensive coordinators said the smartest part about Spags as a defensive coordinator is he comes in with 3 or 4 different game plans for every game. So it's almost like a choose your own adventure. I think the minute he saw where Monken was going, he's like, all right, I got this dude figured out. And then he just sat there and played chess while everybody else was playing checkers.
Crazy.
One reason that I was not as critical of Dan Campbell as others is because we spend a lot of time when teams get knocked out of the playoffs. We do a lot of the, hey, what got you here was this, and you totally went away from it. Talking about the Ravens, of course, going away from the run. Like that's what, that was a part of your identity coming in. How do you go away from that? For the Lions, what I could appreciate about Dan Campbell is what got him here is what ultimately got him knocked out. He didn't go away from what got him here. He's been aggressive all season, to a fault at times, yes, but it's sometimes tough. Like when your biggest strength is your biggest weakness, that's ultimately what knocked the Lions out. Their biggest strength was them being aggressive and not, being like every other team in the NFL. Ultimately, it's what cost them. I'm not as down on Dan Campbell as a lot of others are as far as the criticism being thrown his way. I do know that he can't continue to lose big games because of that type of aggressiveness. He needs to win some big games with that type of aggressiveness too, to be able to kind of wash out, if you will. But you might have touched on it briefly, but just overall, from all the different sides you've heard come in on Dan Campbell, the Lions, are they set to get back, or is that type of coaching going to hold them back more moving forward?
No, I think the Lions are set to be good for a really long time. I genuinely believe that. And I believe that Dan Campbell is not only a very good coach, I believe he's become the type of guy that the players want to play for. And that matters in the modern NFL more than I think we give it credit for. Like, some of it's business. There's always going to be guys that take the money wherever the money is. But if there are 2 offers on the table and one's from the Lions and one's not, and they're of equal value, for a lot of years, the answer to Detroit was no. And I think Dan Campbell's a big part of why the answer is yes. So, with that being said, I do think there's the opportunity to get back. Also, though, we have to be real. Like, I believe at this point that the Packers look like they're going to be a good football team for a minute. And the Vikings were still better than most of us thought, and what most of us thought was going to be a bit of a rebuild year, right? So, and if the Bears come in with Caleb Williams, I got to wonder what their future looks like too. So I think this is opportunity lost for the Lions, and Campbell's right. You don't just get back. But I also think that the Lions are going to be in this situation where they are in whatever. If you go into a bar and you say, I want top shelf vodka, that NFC top shelf is going to include the Lions for a long time.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, with us here. Help us transition to the next part of this conversation. What's your definition of a dynasty? Win or lose, is the Kansas City Chiefs already a dynasty? What's your definition of a dynasty? And if the Chiefs lose, are they no longer considered that? Like, what's your takeaway? Because some people get annoyed when we refer to them as a dynasty. Other people are saying, yes, they are. What's your takeaway? What's your definition of dynasty when it comes to, at least from the NFL perspective at this point?
When you're a roadblock nobody can get through, you're a dynasty. And that's what the Chiefs are to the AFC right now. They're a roadblock nobody can get through. So because of my age, I'm always going to think of the Buffalo Bills, right? And at the time, the Buffalo Bills were couched as the ultimate losers for losing 4 straight Super Bowls. But all of us that were watching football in that era remembered that the Bills were that team you just couldn't beat. Until the Super Bowl, you just couldn't beat. So am I going to look back on 4 straight years of Super Bowls and not think of that as a dynastic era for the Bills? I think it was, right? And so this is where to a fault, I just don't put the same weight on championships that other people put. And I know I can already hear people yelling through the radio saying, well, what's the point? What's the point? But the greatest example, and I did an interview last week for Yahoo with Dan Marino, and I flat out asked him, like, how am I supposed to judge you as a quarterback when you didn't win a Super Bowl? Because that's always going to be stuck in my head. We want to make quarterback performances only about what they did in the playoffs. Well, I'll tell you that Dan Marino lost the only Super Bowl he was ever in. So does that mean that Dan Marino's not great? And does that mean in some world I got to put Trent Dilfer ahead of Dan Marino? Like, I'm not going to do that. So to me, part of what's hard here is that you have to look at some of this from an angle of, like, who'd you lose to and why? So Would it help the dynasty performance for the Chiefs or the conversation if they win a Super Bowl? Yeah. But if you're Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and every year you can book your trip to the Super Bowl because you know you're going to be there, and you do it some years when you got no help, and you do it some years when your defense is pretty good, and you do it some years when your offensive line stinks, and you do it some years when you're stacked and loaded. Like, at some point, I'm just looking at Reid Mahomes saying, this is a dynastic performance. This is an all-time performance. And what we're seeing right now is one of the best coaching quarterback combos we've ever seen and maybe ever will see. So, like, that to me all screams of dynasty with or without the Super Bowl win. By the way, I still think they're going to win. I'm done betting against Mahomes, but even without the win, I still think they're in that conversation.
Last one for me. So I'm going out to Vegas for the Super Bowl. The wife is coming with me, so she's made me make reservations at STK and Nobu. How hurt are my pockets going to be?
Let me tell you something. Like at Nobu, just like take 2 credit cards. Like that. No, like STK ain't going to be bad. STK is like every other steakhouse. It's bad, but it ain't that. Like Nobu is one of those things where it's like put as much as you can on this one and then put the rest on that one. That's the sort of dinner you have at Nobu, because like the portions are kind of small there too. So if you're hungry,
sounds like you should have had a no-boo policy.
Exactly.
You should not have brought the wife with it. A no-boo policy is kind of what you should have had with this. If this sounds that expensive, sorry, Jason.
I should have just went out there with me and my brother, and we just been eating pizza all weekend.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the 2 things that I would tell you that will save you a little bit of money. About halfway down the strip, there's a Denny's on the strip that's actually a pretty normal price Denny's. And inside Planet Hollywood, there's a P.F. Chang's. It's a normal price P.F. Chang's. Find those 2 gems and eat other meals there just to make it like, yes, eat moons over my hammy instead, just because it'll help you save a little bit of that Nobu money. Just like, and when people walk up and say, did you really go to Denny's in Vegas? You can look at them and say, man, I survived Nobu. Get off my back.
Thanks for the advice.
All right. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, awesome enough to give us some time. Send us out with this last thing. Bengals, a lot of Bengals fans, everyone worked up about what the Bengals are going to do with T. Higgins. Look, teams franchise tag star players all the time. Big picture, though, the Bengals, we've never seen a team with the highest paid quarterback and the highest paid receiver ever in the history of the NFL. And it looks like the Bengals might be going in that direction with Jamar Chase, but there's just no room for T. Higgins. Now the big debate is, do you franchise tag him, or do you tag and trade him? What do you do if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? Because they have cap space, but a big chunk of that will go to him if they tag him for 1 year. Everyone has different opinions on this. What should the Bengals do with T. Higgins for 2024?
I would tag him and then see where it goes from there. Like, you're right. Long term, he's not going to be a part of this team, but I'd tag him and see if I can at least stick him around for 1 more year just to try. Like, I still believe that with Joe Burrow, the Bengals are in a Super Bowl window. So I'm going to do anything that I can to try and respect that Super Bowl window.
All right, good stuff. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, you're the best. We'll talk next week.
Yeah, I'll be in Vegas, so hit me up. Let's go.
Actually, Kev, you and him will hang out next week. Sounds
go
good.
Time, baby.
Okay. Let's go, baby.
You and Jason at the Denny's.
Sure as hell not at Nobu. Come on now.
Good stuff. Jason Fitz, he's the best. Appreciate his time. Kidder and Kev, 1410 ESPN Radio.
Listen, stream, watch. It's the Justin Kinner Show with Kev Nash, right here on Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM.
If you only have a 401k, you're not getting the most for retirement.
Wait, what?
Add a Robinhood IRA on top, then they'll boost it by 3%.
You can do that?
And if you transfer in any retirement account, you get 3% on top of that.
Is there a limit to the match?
No limit. Robinhood Gold gets you the biggest contribution match of any IRA on the market. Sign up for Robinhood Gold at Robinhood.com/boost by April 30th. Subscription fees apply.
Investing involves risk. 3% match requires gold for 1 year from first match. Must keep IRA for 5 years. Match on transfers subject to additional terms and conditions. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC.
Jackie Robinson